Catching bass in cold water conditions with a crankbait is a popular technique used by the pros. And there's a couple of tips that they have learned and little techniques they figured out throughout the years that they like to keep to themselves. Today in this video, we're going to share with you 3 unique tips that will help you catch more fish on a crankbait during the cold water conditions.
One of my favorite baits to fish during the winter is a crankbait. Crankbaits do a phenomenal job at creating reaction strikes from lethargic fish. You know, the fish are cold-blooded, therefore in cold water, they're not going to be as active. They don't need to feed as much because they're expelling a lot less energy. So the key to it is to recognize that you still need a bait that's going to create a reaction strike, and a crankbait does that. But I want to add that you can't just go throw a crankbait anywhere. There's a right time and a place to throw a crankbait. Generally speaking, you're looking for your rock transition banks, your channel swing banks, maybe a stumpy flat, areas that have targets that are going to absorb sunlight and produce heat. That's what the fish are truly looking for. They're not moving up into these areas to feed, they're looking up to warm their bodies. So you want to find an area where there's targets that the fish can sit next to. Now, having said that, if you've got a warm wind blowing warmer water into an area, or you've got the sun exposed bank, those are going to be things that make those areas better. But one tip for you, anytime you're grabbing a crankbait and fishing those types of places, choose a crankbait in the winter that's got a very, very slow float. This is one of my favorites. This is the Berkley Money Badger crankbait. It does a phenomenal job at hunting through these areas. It's got a very similar wobble and hunting action to the old wiggle wart, so therefore it really does a great job at deflecting off stumps and rocks without getting hung up. But having said that, the biggest key to it in the cold water is its very slow rise. What that slow rise does is it allows the fish time to react to it. It's keeping the bait in the strike zone. If you use a crankbait that's got a very fast rise, which is something I like to do in the summertime, that bait actually moves out of the fish's strike zone much faster and therefore limits the amount of time they have to react to it. So choose a crankbait like a money badger that's going to have that slow rise, and you'll get more bites every time you pause it. The other thing here is a lot of times I would even choose to go with a suspending bait. The problem with suspending crankbaits is they tend to get hung up quite a bit more. So that little bit of a rise is enough to back your bait up out of those snags and allow you to get your bait back, but it also generates those strikes from lethargic fish. It gets that reaction strike, and that's what makes crankbaits so deadly to fish in the winter. So head out to the water right now, find yourself some channel swing banks, rock transitions, sun exposed areas, grab yourself one of these money badgers or another similar crankbait and go catch yourself some fish.
What's up, guys? Hey, it is cold. We just had a bunch of cold rain, ice, and sleet come down my way. I know right above me, right a couple hours above me, there's inches of snow on the ground. Hey, as I'm getting my boat ready, there's going to be one thing I'm not going to forget as I go out and fish tomorrow, and that is my Sweet Baby Ray's beef jerky by Bridgeford Food Corporation. Hey, if it wasn't for Bridgeford Food Corporation, guys, we wouldn't be able to put out 2 to 3 videos a week for you to watch and enjoy and get content to become a better angler yourself. So we want to say a big shout out to Bridgeford for sponsoring the Bass Fishing Declassified YouTube channel. And also, hey, if you'd like a free case of this beef jerky, leave us a comment on this video of your favorite tip, just a little nugget you like. I know right now y'all just listened to Matt, and man, Matt just shared some juice, and you're about to actually hear Randy, what he says about fishing crankbaits in the winter. And guys, what Randy's about to share is stuff I have done the past 2 years, and it was pretty neat for me as I edited the video. I was like, wow, Randy just nailed this. It's actually something that I know I've done and caught some big fish on in recent years, and it's just cool to hear a guy like Randy talk about it. Anyways, hey, once again, leave a comment and hopefully come back and check the Friday video to see if you want a free case of this beef jerky right here.
Today we're going to be talking about wintertime cranking strategies, and I got some really good tips and advice to give you on my favorite technique, which is slow cranking a lipless crankbait like this Megabass Vibration X for wintertime bass. Now, when you think about wintertime bass fishing, a lot of people don't think about lipless crankbaits, but guys, I'm going to share with you all something that is not very well known. This is one of the best ways to catch some of the biggest bass that you'll catch all year long, particularly in late winter time, like that late winter, early pre-spawn period, which we're coming up on right now. Now the technique that I use involves the bait is real critical for this. So this is a Megabass Vibration X, and it weighs 3/4 of an ounce. It's a little bit heavier than the traditional 1/2 ounce lipless crankbait, and this is what you want because I'm slow cranking this thing, keeping it close to the bottom, which is really key to getting the fish to trigger on this particular type of a lure category. Now what I'm looking for here is I'm going to the backs of the flatter coves and the backs of the flatter creeks. Now, most of this time, people don't equate going to the backs of the coves and the creeks in the wintertime. But guys, one of the things I found out is when you have water temperatures sort of in that mid to upper 40s range that are starting to warm up close to 50 degrees, which is normally into January, into February, that type of deal, there's a percentage of the bass that start using this shallow water before any other bass do in the backs of these coves. Because a lot of times, if you guys sort of venture back in some of that shallow water, you'll see some shad and bait fish back in there, even if the water's cold. There's just something about it. They tend to gravitate towards that in the late winter. And what I do is I go back about 2/3 of the way back into these areas, and I start fan casting this Megabass Vibration X all over the middle of the back of the coves. I'm not really targeting the banks with this particular technique. I'm looking to fish that water sort of in that 4 to 8 foot zone in the middle of these coves. Now these bass, what they do is they'll set up and they'll position in the middle of these coves, sort of like early stagers getting ready for their pre-spawn periods or spawning period, and they'll just sort of hunker down there in the middle of these coves. I'll go back in there, I'll just fan cast the lipless crankbait. What I do is I throw it out there and I let it hit the bottom. Usually I'm using like 17 to 20 pound test Seaguar and Vizex fluorocarbon line, fairly heavy line, letting this thing go to the bottom. And once it gets to the bottom, I'm sort of using a slow pumping retrieve, not very far. I'll pump it off the bottom maybe 6 inches and let it come back down. So it's just sort of a slow sweep. It's just like I'll cast it out there and I'll just like that, keeping it close to the bottom like that, almost like you're working a jig. Sometimes I'll mix it up and I'll just reel it in a straight retrieve, trying to keep it within a couple inches of the bottom. Now that's the key. You got to come close to the bottom for these cold water fish. These fish are not going to come up in the water column to hit this, so you got to keep this within a foot off of the bottom. Guys, the biggest stringer of bass I've ever caught in my life, I had a limit 5 that weighed 37 pounds on Lake Murray in South Carolina. It was in February on this very bait, the Megabass Vibration X, doing that exact same thing, what I'm talking about. So this is a really overlooked technique, guys. Try it right now. If you got water temperatures in the upper 40s, around 50s, start going to the back of those coves and the back of the creeks. I prefer the coves that are located within the major creeks, and just fan cast that back 2/3 of an area with the lipless crankbait. And it's a good way to catch some giant bass that a lot of people don't know about. So hope it works for y'all, and we'll see y'all next time.
Okay, the tip I'm going to share with you guys is a tip that I learned from this last season watching Major League Fishing Bass Pro Tour. Alton Jones Jr. guys won a tournament at Lake Fork, and one of his lures of choice, which I noticed and I remember watching it, was very unique. And you know, guys, it was very unique because it was something that you get told not to do during this time of year with the cold temperature. They had a front come in, if you've kept up with the tournament, but the water was like 40 degrees when he was catching these fish. And he was catching them with a square bill crankbait. And when you hear wintertime crankbait fishing, you always hear flat-sided crankbaits. You don't hear many guys talk about a true square bill. Alton Jones Jr. was using the Berkeley square bill crankbait. I believe he was using the 5.5 size that can get a little deeper. The reason he went to that square bill crankbait was because he was fishing some very thick cover, stumps, as you guys know at Fork. I mean, he was way back up there in the creek, and that flat-sided crankbait, which he caught some fish on, I think, practice and maybe, first day of tournament, but it was getting hung up, and the flat sides do get hung up more typically than a square bill. So he found out that square bill was actually triggering bites in this cold water. And so my tip is you just cannot leave out the square bill, guys. And you can also just remember that there's this book I know there used to be all these like rules of fishing, or you read the Bassmaster magazine or watch this show and hey, you got to do this or this or this. But guys, these younger anglers, the younger professionals, okay, they've kind of started going out of the box and they've kind of gone against it. But the forward-facing sonar guys has showed some of these anglers that, hey, I mean, we can catch them with a square bill in 40-degree water. So just do not rule out a square bill no matter the water temperatures. It is just a catch, fish, and lure, and it gets through cover well. And I know from my experience, when I was a younger angler, this right here is the Lucky Craft Fat CB. I believe this is the silent one. I have 2 of these, and the other one's beat up and you can barely see it. This one I've not thrown much. And guys, I've not thrown these square bills in the cold water in a long time. When I was a younger angler and I was still learning and I just really didn't know as much as I do now, I didn't care what the water temperatures was, but when I was fishing your river, dirtier waters, dude, this dude caught fish. And then I know in recent years, I'm like, no, I'm a flat side guy. I got to throw a flat side. So after watching that event, and I'm kept in the back of my mind for this upcoming February into March, them colder water temperatures, if I'm fishing some shallow cover, I'm going to have a square bill on. Like I said, I'm going to put the links in the description to this lure, and like I said, Alton Jones Jr. was throwing the Berkeley square bill. I think he was throwing that 5.5 side, which gets a little deeper in that 6-foot range. He was targeting them stumps in the 6-foot range, and with the conditions he had, guys, the wind, the cloudy days, you know, he couldn't really throw a jerkbait and get those fish, you know, to come out and commit, and he wanted to catch them on a spinnerbait. Like, so I remember I listened to the podcast, guys, where he talked about it. He wanted to throw a spinnerbait, but they just were not reacting to it like they did that square bill. So once again, he went out of the box. He's a very good angler. I mean, very good angler. Those pros are good. And so one thing he did is like, hey, I'm not just going to go by the rules of flat side only. He tried something out, got it to work, won a lot of money, and so that's what I was going to share with you guys today. That's something I've learned from this. One of the things I learned this last year from following the Bass Pro Tour and following the professionals. Hey guys, thank you for watching today's video. Remember to leave us a comment of your favorite tip, okay? And we're going to be able to we're going to try to draw this upcoming Friday for our Bridgeford beef jerky giveaway. So like I said, leave us a tip, comment on the tip. Let us know what you think about the video. We thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.